Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today, let's talk about small thinking. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser. I will be your host for the next however many minutes that I decide to talk. I appreciate you joining me today. I hope you're finding this content beneficial. If you are, please make sure you are sharing it with your friends, your coworkers, your family, anyone who you think would benefit from this type of content in the form of mindset, in the form of tips and tricks for how to lead teams, all those types of things. But I guess mainly mindset, right? Because that's really what leadership is. It's about how you perceive yourself and how you interact with your team in order to get the results that you desire. Probably in the form of efficiency, in the form of effectiveness, in the form of teamwork, in the form of building your culture, all those types of things. And that's the intent of this podcast, is to bring you that type of content in order to help you build amazing teams. Now, a lot goes into it. It's definitely not a one-stop shop, fix-all kind of thing, because there's so many different aspects and so many different moving pieces and variables that go into teamwork, that go into building culture. Certainly your industry, the type of people, your environment, your community, like all kinds of things. And not every situation is the exact same throughout every industry and every organization. However, there are definitely some common denominators and some standard themes that come into play when we talk about leadership. And that's kind of what I focus on, is those kind of overarching principles of leadership. Now, today, I wanted to talk about kind of this concept of small thinking. Now, as a leader, not required, but man, it is super beneficial if you are not a small thinker. If you do not have the mindset of a minimalist, if you do not have the mindset of, well, we're only capable of so much, or we have all these limitations, right? I've talked a little bit before in previous episodes about, limiting mindset and putting limits on your team and things. But I wanted to talk specifically about you as the leader. And are you guilty? Are you a victim of this small thinking mentality? Now, this kind of came about as most of the talks that I do on this podcast of, this interaction that I had, or this attendance. And this, I don't know if this would be controversial, but certainly people have opinions on this one way or another. I will probably express mine during the course of this. But so my wife and I, as you know, we're up in Washington, we're doing some traveling, and we go to church pretty much every Sunday. We certainly have some that we've missed, but we were searching for a new church to go to while we were up here, because we didn't want to just do the online experience, even though we absolutely love Life Church. That's our home church. If you have not checked it out, make sure you visit life.church. They are just an amazing, amazing community. But anyway, so we're finding a local church, and this was one that we had kind of heard about a long time ago, like just decades ago when we used to live up here. And we're like, oh, we're going to go check this one out. And we went, and it was good. It was okay. But then the pastor got up there, and of course, invariably, you go to the sermon where they're talking about money, where they're talking about tithing, and they're talking about income and all those types of things. And, we 100% absolutely believe, yes, we are called to tithe. It is something that it's biblical. It's in the Bible about, the first 10% belong to God. And, and we 100% believe in that. So I had no issue with his message or anything. However, it was super fascinating to me. Now, we're up here in the Pacific Northwest. This isn't exactly Bible Belt type of communities up here. It's not a very large population of churched people, as it were, like it would be in Oklahoma or some of the other, southern states. And it was so fascinating to me to hear this pastor talking about money, and you could just kind of feel some of his, I don't know if angst is the right word, but some of his limiting beliefs about money specifically, not about tithe, not about, what we're called to do as Christians in giving to the church or donating to the church, but just about money in general, about work and jobs and income and revenue, all those types of things. Now, of course, you understand, and pretty much everyone understands, a church, it doesn't operate without money. They have expenses just like any other business. They've got to pay the power. They've got to pay the rent if they don't own their building, or they got to pay the mortgage. They got to pay their staff. Like, there's things that go into it. And that's part of, why we're called to tithe. And the people that go to that church are called to tithe to help support that. Okay. This shouldn't be a controversial subject. It's just what it is as part of that faith. Now, again, what was interesting about he got in and he was talking about his salary as the lead pastor, and he's like, their board of elders, and that then most, if you didn't know, most churches have kind of a board of elders, and think of them like a board of just like any other business. They're like the advisors. They're the ones that help make the financial decisions, the decisions and vision of the church as a whole. And then of course you've got your lead pastor that does the teachings and things like that, and they're involved in various levels. But they had said, this lead pastor was talking and he said, yeah, the church board had decided that they were going to align the pastor's salary with that of the local school teacher's salary. I'm going, well, that's interesting. Okay. So he was basically saying, you can look it up, whatever the local county teacher's salary is for, whatever high school English, and that's what I make. But it was so fascinating because you just could tell and feel. It wasn't that he said he deserved more. It wasn't that he said that he was underpaid or anything like that, but you could tell that he was implying that, and we all know that, school teachers are underpaid, and 100% school teachers are underpaid. There's no way I would go and do that kind of job with that level of responsibility and that level of hardship for that level of pay that they get, 100%. But then I got to thinking, and it became, I don't know if he was trying to make it a point of virtue, like, hey, we're doing this and we only make this, let's just call it 40,000, 50, let's call it 50,000 a year. I don't know what school teachers make here in Washington State. Let's just call it 50,000 a year as a whole number that we can use then as an example. But, he kind of made it this point of virtue, like, yeah, I only make $50,000 a year because, we're trying to provide funds for all these other programs within our organization, within the church in order to do it. And it was kind of the lead in of, they were trying to do this big youth event, which was going to cost like 10 grand to send all these kids to this camp, and between transportation and fees and blah 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 blah, and they basically didn't have the money to do that. And he was asking the church to help send this youth camp to make it happen. But then at the same time, kind of admonishing them a little bit, like, hey, when we ask for these special projects, you essentially take away from your tithe, but we need the tithe in order to pay salaries and pay the rent and keep the lights on, blah 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 blah, right? But that's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on, I keep getting sidetracked, I apologize. I want to focus on just his mindset, because there was an obvious attachment of school teacher salary being low, being insufficient, being inadequate in order to survive in this world. And you could certainly survive, right? But you're not going to be doing anything fantastic. You're definitely not able to donate $10,000 to a youth ministry in order to send the entire youth group to, whatever trip that they're having for their big summer retreat. And that's where small thinking comes in. That's where, if you take this a step further and you look at the board, the members of that board probably have the same small type of thinking, like, oh, well, we can't afford, or this person doesn't deserve, or it's not within our teachings or religion, or it's not Christian-like to make a lot of money. And that's just total BS. That is just absolute garbage. There is nothing that God calls us to say, well, you can only make $88,000 a year. That's all you can have. Then we'll adjust it for inflation each year. Like, no, that is not it. God calls us to not have the love of money. He doesn't say anything about making a lot of money. It's the love of money. So when we get into that aspect of it, you really need to start thinking about what are your limiting beliefs, and how are you thinking small to where it is limiting yourself and your potential for income. And then I just started thinking, I'm like, this is what's keeping this church small. And it was a small church. They had their small congregation, which is fine, but that kind of limiting thinking pervades into all kinds of other different areas. And you need to be cautious of that. And how are you allowing your own limiting beliefs and your own small thinking to affect your organization? Are you keeping them from going out and expanding, from growing and gaining more influence in your industry? What are you doing as the leader in order to encourage big thinking, to encourage thinking that breaks the boundaries, that breaks the top off of the box, to where people have an opportunity to actually excel and grow? And that's our job as leaders, is to inspire, is to move people into helping them be the best that they can be, despite maybe their own limiting beliefs. Let them borrow from your beliefs so that they can crush through their own barriers. So stop thinking small. And that is my encouragement for you today, is how can you stop thinking small and start thinking big? 10x your goals, 10x your actions. Massive actions is what gets it done. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. If you found this beneficial, please make sure you are sharing it with your buddies and coworkers. If you didn't like it, don't share it with anybody, but just move on to the next episode and we'll try again tomorrow. Take care of yourself no matter where you're at in the world. Have a fantastic afternoon. Bye.